Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week, after way too long of a time period, we're going to once again be talking about everybody's favorite super jacked to the gills human-alien hybrid with Pitt number 5. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in June of 1994, this is a fantastic cover. I really like this. It's one of those covers that's so simple and elegant, but just perfect in my opinion. I love this type of thing where, there's nothing super flashy going on, but everything about this cover is like just drawing you in to pick up this book and read it. We've got this entire monochrome red and black background going on here. Even the image logo itself being in the same color scheme. And the only thing that's not colored in this manner is in fact Pitt's hand itself. We also see a couple of glowing red eyes in the background, which are mysterious, but will make more sense once we take a closer look inside. Created by Dale Keown. Story, art, Dale Keown. Script, Brian Houghton. Colors, Joe Chiodo. Lettering, Chris Eliopoulos. Color separations, Ollie Optics. Logo, Chance Wolfe. Film output, Kello Graphics. Outer World, creator, writer, Brian Houghton. Artist, colors, Goran Delic or Goran Delic. I'm not certain how to say this name, I do apologize. Lettering, Chris Eliopoulos. The story begins at night in a warehouse district where we see the police officer who we know as Bobby Harris and also as Rai Key moving through the darkness when she is suddenly confronted by a sword-wielding man. Now, this is not a problem as she actually knows this man whose name is Shiro. He knows her as well as they are both part of the same superhero team as we see him sheathing his swords. Bobby then asks what exactly he's doing out here in the middle of the night, and he replies with a smart aleck quip of, what, a guy can't hang out in front of the entrance to his secret hideout when he wants to? Bobby doesn't find this amusing as they enter the secret hideout, where they are immediately greeted by other members of the team who are happy that Bobby has arrived, as they can now go over the footage of the battle that she was previously involved in. This, of course, being the battle that we saw in issue number 4, where she was engaged in a fight with Zoivod and tried to detain Pitt after the battle was over, but was unsuccessful as Pitt basically was like, shoot me if you want, but I'm leaving, and of course she didn't do anything to try and stop him. Upon learning that there is footage of her most recent encounter with Pitt and the battle that we saw in the previous issue, Bobby Harris becomes rather angry as she exclaims, "So you're telling me you were close enough to film me getting my butt kicked, but not a single one of you stepped in to help? Thanks a lot." However, this is not exactly what happened, as we learn from this character in the blue and white outfit named Kite that they were only able to obtain this footage by hacking into a government surveillance satellite and that they were nowhere near the battle. This is corroborated by this man in the brown suit, whose name we don't actually learn in this issue, as he tells her that they would have helped had they been close enough to do anything about it. Bobby then starts to walk forward, and this large, green, muscular guy, whose name is Saurus, tells her, I knew I should have come with you, Bobby. I'm sorry, I could have helped. Bobby tells him that she appreciates that he cares enough to have been concerned for her safety, but she's then told by the man in the brown suit that he's not certain that Saurus would have been able to make much of a difference, as it seems as though Pitt's physical capabilities are rather outstanding and that he may have been more than a match for their entire team. He also then brings up an interesting point that despite how powerful Pitt is, the battle was not resolved until Timmy intervened and used his powers. He then asks Bobby where this young boy is at, and she explains that he is in fact in New York General Hospital in a coma. And this means that the team has to act fast. Now, there's only one problem with the story as it is, besides the fact that we never learn who the guy in the brown suit is, or this woman here in the zebra pants and the jean jacket, whose name is never told, who never says a word. I have to wonder why she was even drawn into any of these panels. The fatal flaw in the logic behind all of this is that if they hacked into a surveillance satellite to get this footage, there's no way they would have had close-ups like this of both Timmy and Pitt, especially from the angles that we're seeing. You see, as was explained in the movie Enemy of the State, starring Gene Hackman and Will Smith, a surveillance satellite that's hovering 20 miles above the Earth's surface can only look straight down, and it can only zoom in so far, which means that these shots are totally impossible. But, it's probably something that Dale didn't consider and that most people wouldn't consider, and yes, I'm just being pedantic about the whole thing. We are then teleported to New York General Hospital, where we see that Timmy is lying in a bed unconscious as doctors try and figure out what exactly has happened to him. His grandfather, whose name we learn is Mr. Bracken, is rather distraught about seeing his grandson in this condition and is desperately trying to figure out what exactly has been happening over the past few days that has led to this situation. The doctor explains to him that there are some very erratic activities where normal human brain functions should be existing, and Timmy's grandfather then asks if that's why all of his hair fell out. At this point, the doctor goes on to explain that they've brought in some specialists from LA that they hope can help, and that he's not going to mince words. He tells Timmy's grandfather that he literally has no idea what's causing this, and that he's never seen anything like it before, and he's not certain what the course of treatment should be to try and bring Timmy out of this coma. He then tells Timmy's grandfather that he can stay in an adjoining room as he knows it's important to be near loved ones in times like this, as we see a familiar silhouette outside of the window to Timmy's room. Now, it's pretty obvious that the erratic behavior in Timmy's mind is, of course, Jerub, the chakran child, but the doctor would have no way of knowing that, and even if he did, it still wouldn't change the fact that he has no idea how to treat something like an alien entity inhabiting the mind of a young child. Pitt, of course, is the one that the silhouette we see outside here belongs to, and he is on an adjoining rooftop and is monitoring the situation, trying to figure out what his next course of action should be. He's not certain what has caused this and what he can do to help, and he also realizes that the only person who has the answers he's looking for is in fact Jerub, and unfortunately, he has no way of contacting Jerub as he is trapped within Timmy's mind and Timmy is in a coma. He then realizes that he can actually leave whenever he wants, but there's something that's holding him here, something that he can't describe that's keeping him from leaving. On the sidewalk below, we see a very attractive young woman walking through the streets by herself. However, this is no ordinary woman. She's actually quite the major player in the New York City underworld, and she's made some enemies, namely these three men in a nearby alleyway. They're waiting to ambush her because apparently she stiffed them $10,000 on some drugs that she got from them, and they want their money. However, one of the men brings up the word on the street being that this woman will rip the throat out of anyone who crosses her. As she walks by the alleyway, she flicks a cigarette, but one of the men screams, "Hey!" Before she can react, all three of the men grab her and pull her into the alleyway. One of them says to grab her wallet. However, upon opening it, they find out that she only has $15. Unfortunately, they're so preoccupied with kidnapping this woman and stealing her money that they fail to notice Pitt slowly walking up behind them, which seems rather impossible given that he's like 9 feet tall and wearing chains all over his body. It seems as though he would make some noise on his approach, but apparently not. They then say that they're going to force this woman to take them to where she has the money, and that if she doesn't, they're going to kill her instead. However, before this can go any farther, Pitt reaches out and grabs two of the men by the head, yanks them up into the air off their feet, and throws them against a nearby brick wall. Pitt then grabs the third man and lifts him off the ground by nothing but his hair. When the man screams out in pain, Pitt tells him to shut up and asks, "Do you really believe this is a fair physical fight, 3 men against 1 woman?" The man then asks Pitt to let him go and please not to kill him, but Pitt once again tells him to shut up as he grabs a nearby street sign and rips it clean out of the ground, pavement and all. The woman who they were accosting is now bruised and bloodied, and she simply looks at Pitt and asks him, "What are you, some kind of a superhero?" As she doesn't seem nearly as distraught as you might guess given the situation at hand. Pitt then uses the street sign post as a rope and wraps it around the three men to incapacitate them. He then tells the woman that she may want to call the authorities, and she responds simply by stating, this city's already got too many superheroes as it is. Pitt decides that this is the time to make his exit as he simply says, "You're welcome," and walks away. The woman then turns back towards the men who accosted her as one of them states, "What are you going to do, call the police?" She responds by telling him, "No, I've got a better idea. I'm going to kill you," as she suddenly and very unexpectedly turns into a werewolf. The men scream out as she opens her mouth wide, drooling with large, jagged teeth, and the scream reaches back all the way up to where Pitt is climbing up the side of the building he was perched on before. He realizes that the scream is coming from the same alleyway he just left as he bounds back down the building to see what's happened. As he re-enters the alleyway, he sees the three men he left tied up having all of their heads removed. He's stunned by this and then begins to wonder where the girl is and what's happened to her. He, of course, didn't see the transformation and has no idea that she is a werewolf now, and he is then suddenly interrupted by someone off-panel simply stating, "I kill." This, of course, being the girl who just transformed into a werewolf. Now, I, for one, would have never guessed that this was where this story was going in this issue. I mean, up until this point, we've only seen Pitt deal with his father and intergalactic alien bounty hunters, and at no point did you open up this book thinking to yourself, what's going to be next on the list of enemies he's going to have to face? A werewolf. That would exactly be the one you'd pick on your bingo card. No! What the heck is a werewolf doing in this issue? And is this just some random werewolf? Is this werewolf part of the Were Nation from Wetworks? We have no idea. All of this is just kind of like, holy crap, we're going to throw this at the wall and see if it sticks kind of energy. The wolf then suddenly lunges at Pitt, screaming, "I kill you." Pitt, of course, is understandably caught off guard as he, much like us, was not expecting a werewolf to suddenly appear. The wolf immediately tries to bite his head clean off of his shoulders, and it's at this point that we actually get a good look at just how big this woman is in her werewolf form, as she is basically the same size, if not even larger than Pitt himself. Pitt realizes that the werewolf is trying to bite his head off and that if he does nothing, she very well may succeed. At this point, he punches her in the stomach and flings her off of his body, screaming for her to get off and stay off. However, the wolf immediately recovers and once again continues to attack Pitt, lunging forward, screaming "kill," as she slashes with her claws, slicing Pitt open across his face. It's also important to note that the wolf seems to be rather feral, as most of her humanity seems to be gone in this form, and she seems to be overcome with some sort of a bloodlust at this point. Finally, Pitt reaches his breaking point as he screams enough and goes on the counter-offensive, landing punch after punch on the werewolf until she is finally flung back into a nearby wall. Pitt screams at her to stay down, but she gets back up and says, "I rip your head off." And can we just appreciate how awesome this panel right here looks? It's easy to admire Dale Keown's penciling for his musculature and anatomy, and he's great at that, but I don't think enough people say enough good things about his ability to draw characters encompassed in shadow. He was so good at knowing exactly where to put all the shadow, where to put the detail, and where to make the character pop and disappear. And then you add in Joe Chiodo's color work on top of it, and you just get absolute magic on a page. And this is why I like this type of paper so much better than gloss. You would lose some of this in gloss because you would get reflection from the paper, whereas with this matte paper you don't, and it's exactly why I wish the industry would go back to using this type of paper, because it's superior in basically every way. We're then treated to even more of the wonderful shadowing technique that I talked about on the previous page, where we see Pitt in this full-page splash preparing himself for another assault from the werewolf, as he simply states, "You already tried that before." We then get an advertisement for this Pitt watch, which I can't remember if this was made by Fossil or not. Either way, I want one of these so bad. If I ever find one of these, I am buying it, no questions asked. I don't care if it works or not. I want to have this watch somewhere because this watch is awesome. Yes, it's ridiculous. Yes, you would look ridiculous wearing it as an adult in 2026, which is when I'm recording this video. But I don't care. I want it, and I want to wear it, and I don't care what anyone says about me wearing it. As the werewolf jumps into the air preparing to make another assault, Pitt simply says it didn't work then, as he punches a hole in the werewolf's chest and rips its heart out clean in one motion. He then says, "And it didn't work now," as we see his hand covered in blood. However, at this point, Pitt becomes very confused as he watches the werewolf suddenly revert back into its human form, realizing that this werewolf was in fact the woman that he saved only moments earlier. At this point, Pitt becomes rather confused, not just by the fact that the woman that he saved before turned into a werewolf, but also by the fact that she tried to attack him then, and there's no reason why she should have done that, given that he only tried to help her before. However, werewolf or not, it doesn't change the fact that she is now dead by his hand, and he has to figure out what his next move should be. Unfortunately, before that can happen, he's interrupted by none other than Kite, who is joined by Saurus. Kite tells him that he is under arrest and that he has the right to remain silent, and that anything he says can and will be used against him. At this point, Saurus chimes in and tells him, "Yeah, so you better not say nothing or I'm gonna pound you." I think this is actually just a means of illustrating that Saurus isn't exactly the brightest guy, which should already be evident given that he's wearing the world's dumbest pair of suspenders. But these are all things that we're going to have to find out about in the next issue, because this is where the story for this issue comes to an end. We then reach the letter rip letter section, and this one's actually not terribly interesting. It's only a single page, and most of the letters are just talking about how wonderful they think the Pitt comic book is, though there was one person who wrote in asking for clarification about whether or not Pitt's first appearance was in Youngblood number 4, which Dale Keown does confirm that that is indeed Pitt's first appearance. And had I known that before I started the channel, I would have waited until after I reached Pitt's first appearance in Youngblood number 4 to start then reviewing these Pitt issues. Unfortunately, I didn't know that off the top of my head, and started doing Pitt right off the bat. It's actually, Pitt number 1 is my second video on the channel. I apologize, folks. I could have made this a little bit better in terms of continuity, but I just kind of overlooked that. My bad. We then reach the secondary story in the book called Trial by Fire. However, in the credits it was called The Outer World, which I don't know if that's just the name that they gave for this segment as a whole, and each one is unique. Possibly. I'm not certain, but either way, here we are. And this story is rather strange. It seems to take place in a dystopian future where the world is now under attack from dinosaurs somehow, but not any dinosaur that is necessarily scientifically accurate. These are just dinosaur-esque creatures, if you will. The story is being narrated by an unknown source, as we see 2 young boys running for their lives from a group of marauding dinos. Also interesting in this story is that no herbivorous dinosaurs seem to exist. They all seem to be carnivores bent on eating humans whenever that's a possibility for them. We then see an overhead shot of the city and some large mechanized fans, which the narrator describes as blowing the Badland winds away. I don't know why that's significant at all. It's never explained any further than this, and we don't know what the purpose of these fans is, what the Badland winds exactly are doing. It's a seemingly insignificant detail that was given an entire half of a page for some reason. Moving back to the action, the two boys are still running for their lives as the boy in the hat, whose name is Guidance, tells his friend, whose name is Kreblo, that they have to escape into the park. Kreblo tells him that this is crazy because that is where the dinos breed and feed. However, they don't have much choice as a T-Rex-ish looking dinosaur continues to pursue. Kreblo even stating, "I can smell his breath, he's going to eat me alive." However, as they approach the tree line, suddenly another group of humans carrying high-powered rifles open fire on the pursuing dinosaurs, stating what a way to start the morning as we see dinos fall, and the narrator state that he can see them bleeding on the ground. However, we then learn that the humans with the rifles are actually just shooting at anything that moves, as Kreblo states they're using us for target practice as well. Kreblo and Guidance make a mad dash for a nearby abandoned vehicle that Guidance refers to as a rust bucket. However, we notice that the vehicle has a rather futuristic look to it, and seemingly this would place this story well into the future, or perhaps in some sort of alternate reality. Again, it's not really explained in any detail. As the boys make their way to the abandoned vehicle, Kreblo turns around and sees that the pennies, aka the guys that were shooting at them from the trees, are then being eaten by some of the dinosaurs themselves. Kreblo thinks that this might help them as they no longer have to dodge bullets, but that doesn't change the fact that they're still being pursued by the dinosaurs. Kreblo then notices that the key is still in the ignition, and he tells Guidance, hey, maybe we could just drive right out of here. However, Guidance quickly brings up the fact that this car has been sitting here for nearly 60 years and that it'll never run, but he does have an idea that may work to their advantage as we see him get out of the car and pop the hood. Guidance then retrieves the battery from underneath the hood and tells Kreblo that they're going to use the battery acid to pour a protective circle around themselves and light it on fire because the dinos are afraid of fire. However, the dinosaurs have gotten a whiff of their scent and are quickly approaching. Guidance realizes that they've been had and tells Kreblo to light the match. Kreblo says, duh, lights the match, drops it, and ignites all of the battery acid, which surrounds them in a circle of flame. The dinosaurs are in fact quite afraid of this, and then Kreblo brings up the interesting point of, I certainly hope they run away before the flames die down, which, again, could be a fatal flaw in this plan if they just stick it out. I'd also like to mention that this plan would have never worked, and this is because battery acid is not flammable. I looked this up just to be certain. While lead acid batteries for cars can be flammable, this is due to hydrogen gas that can be released from the battery upon rapid charging, not the battery acid itself. The battery acid itself is not flammable, just corrosive. So the boys honestly should be getting eaten by all of these dinosaurs right now. Eventually, the dinosaurs run off and the boys are able to make their way back to their home after the flames die down. They're both happy to be safe and sound back in their home. However, it's at this point we find out that the narrator was in fact himself another dinosaur who had been watching from the bushes the whole time. As the boys walk by, the dinosaur leaps out and rips Guidance's arm clean off of his body, walking away with it, saying to himself, what a nice snack, as we see Guidance holding the stump where his arm used to be, bleeding out on the ground, as Kreblo tries his best to console his friend. And we then see that this is not the end, as it states at the bottom right-hand corner. Though I don't know of any other times this story comes up. I'll have to keep an eye out for it in other books. Maybe we'll see more of this and see what happens in the future to the two boys, assuming Guidance even survives this ordeal. We then get into the sneak peek of the Wildcats animated series, and I'm going to try and breeze through this really quick because I've seen this in several other books and covered it in several other videos, and I don't want to waste a lot of time on it. The series premiered on September 17th on CBS at 10 a.m. Here's a picture of what all of the characters look like in their animated form. Here's a bunch of storyboard sequences from one of the episodes. Here's concept art of the Demonite spacecrafts. And on the final page of the book, we get a look at some of the production staff who worked on the Wildcats animated series. I do apologize for zooming through that so quickly, but as I've stated, I've talked about this in great detail in other episodes, and I don't feel like there's much of a reason for me to repeat all of the same points I made before and go into much greater and lengthier detail about an animated series from 30 years ago that was canceled after one season. And on the reverse inside cover, we get an advertisement for both Boof and the Bruise Crew. I have a handful of issues of Boof, but I don't think I have any issues of Boof and the Bruise Crew. I don't recall ever seeing this before. I'll have to do a little bit of digging to see how many issues of that existed and if I can possibly find them. If I do, I'll definitely make videos about them, and stay tuned because one of these days I'll make videos about the issues of Boof that I have as well. And that was Pitt number 5. And honestly, I'm not entirely certain what to make of this book. The artwork is phenomenal. I really love the cover, but the story just feels completely disjointed from everything we've seen in Pitt up until this point. Keep in mind, issues 1 through 4 were all focused on Pitt fighting, alien bounty hunters and his father and trying to defend Timmy from being kidnapped and the interactions with Jerub, the Chakran child. And now all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we get this whole subplot with Bobby Harris, who, by the way, she's been a part of the story up until this point. So that part I didn't mind. I do like learning more about the superhero team that she's involved with and getting more backstory as to what her motives may be, even though we didn't learn exactly how she got her superpowers or what exactly the goal that her team is working towards is. But, it's still more information about her character. But the other part of the story is just seemingly nonsensical, where all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a woman shows up and turns into a werewolf and attacks Pitt for seemingly no reason. It just doesn't seem like it fits at all. I'm not really certain what the thought process was here. Again, it's entirely possible that she is one of the werewolves from the Werewolf Nation or the Were Nation that exists in Wetworks, and maybe that's the tie-in. We'll learn going forward. But, the way it's presented, it just seems just like such a completely random thing to do that doesn't fit into the rest of the story at all. And then, of course, we get the trial by fire sub-story at the back end, and that also just feels kind of completely out of place. And I get it's supposed to be like a violent comedy type of thing where, the twist ending is that the narrator was a dinosaur the whole time who had been stalking the boys and was just waiting for the right time to jump out and, rip the one boy's arm off and eat it. And okay, fine, but the artwork was kind of so-so, and, we didn't really get a feeling as to why any of that story mattered because there was so little to it. We didn't know who these boys were, why we should care about them. We didn't know where the dinosaurs came from, what the hell those fans were about that they used half a page to show us, but never explain why they were significant in any way. The whole book, start to finish, just seems like an absolute, slapdash project. And part of me kind of likes it, but part of me kind of doesn't. I'm really kind of at a loss for this one. But then again, these are just my opinions. Your opinion might be that you thought this book was amazing cover to cover, or you might have thought it was absolutely terrible from start to finish. And if that's the case, it's okay, because everyone's entitled to their own opinion. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.